Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is old Uncle Randy, and this is the Happy Hour Lifestyle Show coming to you high atop the 48th floor, overlooking the beautiful Midwest and the snow heading our way for tomorrow. If you look at the Weather Channel today, being that it's February 11th, you would think that snow would be coming, and guess what? All our wishes are going to be fulfilled. So, this show is brought to you by Live Eco Style. Beautiful name in all the good things in life, and that's about dining, sipping, travel, and fashion, sports, golf, and spas. So it's those are all the good things. And sitting with me today, what we are doing is getting to meet all the key people at Live Eco Style and those that are on our media and those that are our good friends. So today we are going to meet and understand who brings you all those things that people believe but just ain't true. His series, Robert Mills. Robert Mills, good afternoon. How are you doing, sir?
Good afternoon, Randy. It's always a thrill to be with you on this incredible channel that you have. It's such an awesome place, and I'm delighted to be with you.
Well, we appreciate you too, coming from California, where you're going to get a little bit of rain and cold. It's going to be blowing into San Diego for the tournament at Torrey Pines, and I know that the fires are mostly out, from what I understand. Thank goodness. But we all have had our struggles. But Robert, you've been a key person here, and we really welcome you to our Happy Hour Lifestyle Show because other than taking off our clothes, we won't do that, but we are going to delve into all these good things in life. And so today, in meeting Robert Mills, as we go forward, Robert has been a friend of mine since we met in high school a few days ago. And in Freeport, Illinois, we were known as Freeport Pretzels. That's our mascot name. But Robert has had a distinguished career, if I can get it out. Again, a global traveler, and we're going to get into we've done many features on his traveling and flying and visiting around the world, which is going to be a lot of fun. He's a mountain climber. So tell us, Robert, how many mountains have you climbed of all the highest peaks in the United States?
Well, there's 58. Well, there originally were 58 peaks in the United States that were over 5,000 feet from the base to the top, not the elevation above sea level, because that's not that really interesting in terms of mountains, because there's a lot of bumps on hills in Colorado that are 13,000 feet. So what matters with a mountain is how big it is, how prominent. That's the term that geologists use, map people, prominence. There were 58. One of them was Mount St. Helena that blew its top and it ceased to be.
Yeah.
But two guys climbed it and then went on to climb all of the other 57. And they're the only people who can ever say, I did all 58 because that one of them's gone now. But anyway, there are 57 in the continental US that are over 5,000. And I climbed all of them except the Grand Teton. And the Grand Teton, I had a dispute with the way they run it and the guides and and you have to stay in some tiny little. And I just said I'm going to call that an asterisk. And I climbed a peak immediately behind it, which is only a few hundred feet. And that peak behind is called the enclosure. And the enclosure has this unbelievable structure on top, which they cannot figure out how it got there. I mean, it's on a fifth class straight up climb, and it was built by Native Americans like thousands and thousands of years ago, and it's still there. So I went up there to climb the enclosure fifth class peak with a guide, and so that's my 56 peaks.
Well, it's quite remarkable. So that's his resume. That's it. No, he's not. That's not all his resume. That's his hobby. Just this past weekend or two, he went on a 20-mile hike at the tender age of over 50, substantially, as we all are today, and which is incredible. Anything's over 2 miles, I take a car. Robert says, nah, good hike for the weekend. How many days were you out this past weekend? Was it this past weekend?
Throughout 3 days. And we went down to Joshua Tree National Park, which is a gorgeous place. We were going to climb in Coast State Park here. We had a big 25-mile loop. Then it started raining, and I cannot abide camping in the rain. Snow, wind, rain. so we pivoted over to do something in Death Valley, and then that was like rain and snow, and we weren't sure there was going to be water, and so we pivoted a third time, and we got in the car and we drove to Joshua Tree, which is this gigantic park east of Palm Springs, out in the middle of the desert. And after several mountain ranges and 550 miles away, we got into this wonderful, clear, warm, and and at night we camped and you look at see the moon and the stars blazing, and it was absolutely spectacular.
Well, things that people believe that just ain't true. All of that he just told you is true, so we'll go with that because I know Robert is passionate. We're going to get back to his climbing actually in separate shows as we go forward here in the future. But also through your life, Robert, I mean, you've had an amazing career. You were a consumer advocate attorney, if I guess that's the correct.
Consumer class action lawyer.
Yeah. How many years did you do that?
About 30 years.
Wow.
And my firm was responsible for collecting many billions of dollars for injured and ripped off consumers from banks, insurance companies, oil companies, big retailers, and the big box retailers, and others who were stealing and mistreating. And I also did some oddball stuff. I sued the entire barbecue propane industry because they were injuring people, and I made them redesign all barbecues in the U.S., including I sued all the tank manufacturers and made them put stop fill devices in there so that when these teenagers fill it in the gas station, they can't overfill it. If it's more than 2/3 full of the gas, when it gets warm, it will suddenly release it, causing some potential conflagration. And there were 1,800 people injured by these, and all over the U.S. And the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission issued some warning about it and tried to stop it. I sued it, fixed the whole thing, and hasn't been hardly an injury since. That was
Well, of course, not to go into it, but the consumer product, if I understand today in today's politics, is being shut down. So.
Oh, they shut the consumer products. They shut the consumer, all the consumer stuff, all the consumer fraud. Well, the I'm sorry, the consumer class action lawyers like me and the others that were out there in the United States, we were collecting $400 billion a year that was being ripped off by big companies and others in the consumers and employees and investors. And the big business had schemed to get rid of this for a long time. And so they finally got their 5-4 majority on the Supreme Court. And they ruled that you could put a clause in the agreement you sign when you open a bank account, or you sign to rent a car or whatever, open a bank account, and you can say in there that you cannot file a class action. Now that case started out in California. It was called Discovery Bank case, and I worked on it and went to the California Supreme Court, and the California Supreme Court says, "What? You expect us to allow you, these little, people have been ripped off for $1 or $1,000. They can't sue you. They have no remedy other than a class action. So you want us to authorize you to exculpate yourself from your own intentional wrongdoing? No way." 7-0, the Republicans, the old Republicans.
All right.
And so they took it to Supreme Court, 5-4, and it's called Concepcion. Anyway, they ruled that it's okay to put a clause in your contracts, and you can't bring a class action. And overnight, I mean, when you open or rent a car, anything you sign has this clause in there. You can't bring a class action. And after that was, the amount of fraud in the United States exploded. I mean, people say, who do you believe? There's no way to know for sure, but somewhere between $1 and $3 trillion a year is just stolen. And when I was doing it, most victims don't know they're victims.
Right.
And insiders in banks and other companies would send me documents secretly, anonymously, saying, "Look what this bank is doing. They're opening these accounts. They're cheating this. They're putting these fake fees." And all these businesses were doing this, and they would come to us, and we would sue. We would collect that money. Today, there are no class actions. And I mean, if you don't sign something, you can do a class action, but there's very few opportunities of that. And so for the most part, in the areas where this is happening, there is no class actions. And now, thanks to the current administration, there is no federal protection whatsoever for consumers. And so this is going to be an enormous encouragement to these big companies to rip you off. And you won't know it because they hide it in the paperwork, and they put fees and these unlawful fees, and they do all kinds of stuff, and they just lie about it. And if you're not an insider, there's no way you read the financial accounting and the statements, you can't see it there. And so there's no way to know. So anyway, there's going to be, I mean, fraud is a growth industry in the United States, and it is, if you could invest in stock and fraud, you would make a lot of money. And of course, the scams are also growing. We've talked about this before, that scams work are lucrative. And there's an old saying among dog trainers that behavior that's rewarded is behavior that's repeated.
Right.
And so these scams come on, they ask you, they do all this stuff, and people believe it, and they click, and they do all these things, and they give them money. And, so there's, I think it was the last check was over 10 billion a year going to scammers. And that's just what's acknowledged. There's studies that show that women that were sexually assaulted, only 30% of them report it. They don't even bother with it. And so the same is true of these consumer crimes. Only a small fraction of victims bother. They're embarrassed about it. I gave this guy on the phone money. I sent it to him in Outer Mongolia. And, of course, everybody's mocking me. And so they don't report it. And actually, there's nothing can be done about it anyway. Because in my consumer class action firm, we only took 1 out of every 400 cases that came to us. Why?
Yeah.
Because you have to have a brick and mortar company in the jurisdiction of the United States to sue that has money. You can't sue some phantom on the internet, which is what most of them were. And they would come to me, and they thought if I get these people this kind, sweet voice on the, if I give them money, and it turns out I can sue them somehow, or I can go to the police. You can't. There's no way you can ever get that money back. And it's phantom. It doesn't even exist.
Yeah, since this is the Happy Hour Lifestyle Show, I think what we're going to do is focus on you at this point in time, because we know we've covered that topic in the past. And if you want to go to Robert's, actually, I believe the first of our 12 that we did,
yes,
we talked about scams, conspiracy theories, and some of the things going on, with that. But basically, we wanted to learn about Robert Mills. So, Robert, tell us basics, like married with kids, grandkids. How's your life?
Well, I was born in North Carolina, and I went to 10 different schools down there. My father was a defense engineer, and he would be hired by some little company, and he'd work there for 18 months, and then everybody go to work one day to be 1,800 pink slips, and they finished that contract, and he'd go look. And so I lived in all these states all over the place. And it was a fascinating experience to really, to go. I couldn't keep friends much because I kept moving, but it was a very mind-opening experience to go to school in all these different cultures. There were in the South. There's really, people don't realize this. Especially out here in California or even the Midwest, how different these different towns were, how different the cultures are in the South. And culture, I use in this broad sense that how it comes from the ethnic groups that came in there 200 years ago. And some of the behavior stuff is still the same. In Freeport, where you and I met, it was a Polish-German community. That's where the pretzel came from. It had a big emphasis on education. In our high school, a lot of people went to Ivy League, which is very unusual in some little scar on the plains out in Illinois. But that was from an ethnic valuing of education in that community, and it was quite remarkable. But like in the South, in the North Carolina, you have the Piedmont area, the third that's in the eastern side, and that's have a different culture because it was mostly plantations. Or then you have this area called the Piedmont in the middle third of North Carolina, those rolling hills, and a different group came there. The English came there, and they came down, and that's where my mills and they were small farmers. Small, they didn't become plantation owners largely, and uh, you know, all my ancestors, the Millses, were there's a huge graveyard in Apex, and a large number of graves have some kid's name and his birth and death dates, which just shows he's a teenager. And the bottom it says CSA, Confederate States of America. So I lost ancestors in the Civil War. And then up in the mountains of the western third of North Carolina, and this is true of South Carolina and largely of Virginia, you had Irish, a whole different ethnic group that went in there. And the Irish were very different. So you'd have different. When I moved there and lived there, it's a very pugilistic side, a lot of fist fights. It was a very different culture. All these places were fascinating. And so I ended up when I was 18, I went hitchhiking all around the South and worked in steel mills. I was a lifeguard, and then I went to University of Illinois because it was a local school. And then when I was 19, I hitchhiked out to the San Francisco area, and I stayed in Berkeley, went to the Free University of Berkeley, and I looked around the Bay Area, and I went to the beaches, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm coming back here to seek my fortune, and I did. And it took me 3 years to figure out how to finance it. Because I was going out of state. My parents didn't give me money for college, and so I had to pay out of state tuition.
Wow.
But I ended up going to Berkeley late in the game and having to take 20 units a quarter, but I did it, and I graduated from Cal Berkeley with a degree in philosophy. And I was going to get a PhD in philosophy, and my mentor took me aside and he said, "Robert, have you looked at the numbers?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, there's 3,500 PhDs graduate in the United States every year, and there's like 300 jobs. Do you like driving a cab in Manhattan?"
Yeah, tending bar.
So I said, he said, "You ever considered going to law school?"
Right.
So that day I applied to law school, and
so where did you meet your wife?
Well, it's the second round for me, and I had 2 kids with the first round, and my wife had 1 kid, and I went to that was back before the internet, and we've been married for 31 years.
Oh, good for you! Congratulations.
32 years, and so in those days, back when I was, you went to bars, which was pretty awful.
Right.
I used to go to beaches and go troll through libraries, and it was really difficult to meet people. So I thought, so there was a little local newspaper in Marin County, and they opened up the singles ads, okay?
Yeah, there you go.
Kind of a precursor to the internet, the dating apps. And so I thought, this is, and in frustration. So I spent time working up this ad, and I put this ad in the local newspaper. It was a little flyer called the Pacific Sun. And I got 300 responses to it.
I like to walk. Yeah, I can. Let me tell you that. I like to walk beaches in Sunset. I like to cook. I like to pet dogs. I laugh a lot. I just want to find somebody to enjoy life with, and you just sit there and
Well, I said I was an outdoorsman, and I told someone it was worded in a way that got 300, and I was shocked at the quality of these 300 women. They were all of them were like really interesting people.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's not. I think today, if you did it, it wouldn't be like that. But or even when you put these ads on the internet, it was just incredibly attractive people. And so there was a little button you could push, and you could leave a 2-minute message. And so I left this message about myself, and still had a little bit of a Southern accent. And so my wife went on there and listened to me talk after reading it. She wasn't even going to respond to it, but she had these neighbors. It'd come over and make dramatic readings and laugh about these ads.
Yeah.
But came to mind. They read it and they said, "Yeah, this, you know." So she, after 3 times, she finally picks up the phone, not intending to leave a message or anything, just to hear my voice, you know. So I went on about myself, and then I said, and I have the 2 cutest kids in the universe. And so she couldn't help herself. She just said, you know, I believe in truth in advertising. And, you know, you say you have the 2 cutest kids in the universe. I know for a fact that's not true because I have the cutest kid in the
Oh,
universe.
very cool. Yeah.
And if you would like to call me and clear up this misunderstanding, you know, here is my
Yeah.
number. So I called her up and we went back and forth and for you know, many conversations and finally met. And uh, you know, the rest is history. And we got married and way back, and you know, and so my wife loves she was a Harvard graduate, and she loves travel. And she's a member of a lot of public things, and she was the head of she was the national award of Big Sister of the Year for the Big Brothers Big Sisters, as a charity people adopt. And President Bush, who was big into that, invited her to the White House to
Wow.
meet. And so I tagged along, and so we went into the Oval Office, and I started talking to him. I had an instant rapport with George Bush, and you know, I said, "Mr. President, you know, what is it like to walk on it? Do you sense the presence of you know Abraham Lincoln or
Right.
Thomas Jefferson in these halls, you know?" And he and I, so we went out in the Rose Garden with his dog, and we put, you know, and Miriam was in there, and so we had this wonderful meeting with him. So anyway, so she loves indigenous people, to go in and studies the cultures of them, and she loved to go places that were not developed, and I mean really not developed. And you know, most of the world now, even in these remote places in Thailand or you know Cambodia, there's still guys with motorcycles, and you know, and so we would go to Myanmar and go to you know, places in Africa where people were still basically living in sand, living in these huts, and no electricity, no mopeds or anything, just living off, you know, and we would go, did a lot of that. But we also went to the other capitals, and we went to countries all over the world. I mean, for years and years, and then I flew my plane around all the way around South America with all the capitals, and we had a wonderful. That was quite a trip. That was
Yeah, we've covered that in one of our shows. We're going to recover that. That trip was stunning at best. I think landing by flashlight somewhere, looking at the runway you guided your plane in, you know,
yes,
flying on fumes or upside down or whatever. In fact, it was at one of our reunions that I gave Robert so much grief when he was describing that flight before I really knew about him flying all over the country. And I said, so I think I even put it into maybe a little dialogue that night, and sort of caught grief for it from our other classmates. I said, I said, did you know Robert has a wife who allows him to bounce her head off the ceiling of an airplane flying around South America with no apparent place to land, only by flashlight, and something along those lines. So I was giving you grief right from the first night, hearing that story, that it was so incredible. But now, you know, here are some. Yeah, I'm just going to ask you some fun fact questions that are going to be easy to answer. So you've been out in the woods, you know, you climb and you camp, and
let me jump on that last example, which is
yeah.
it's a true one. I was flying over the Andes, and in southern Andes, down in Patagonia, and the wind there is one of the highest, and it hit the Andes, and it created this turbulence that was so god awful. I mean, it's the worst turbulence I've ever experienced.
Sorry for my laughing, because I'm just recalling this conversation you and I had originally, probably 20 years ago.
Yeah, and so my wife with a belt on was hitting her head on the ceiling. I mean, and so she had to take a sleeping bag and put it over her head. And to get out of this, which was just unbearable, I dived down and went below the line of the mountains there, and ended up going up some deep canyon to get out of the wind. And it slowed me down, and we were landing on a VFR only airport that had no lights. And so I was with three other couples that were flying their airplanes, and they'd already landed their three airplanes, and I was way behind, and it got dark. And I couldn't find the airport was dark. And so they all went out and took their planes and put the lights on and had their flashlights and everything. And they guided me in the dark and to land on this. I put my landing lights on, I could see the runway. But that's it was a fun story.
Fun story. Yeah, not my story. Patagonia. I have a travel group, Polar Travel Company is down there. And of course, our friend Bob Aldrich and Judy would love to go to Patagonia, and so would other people. Just out of your, did you land in Patagonia? I mean, did you
Oh, I did.
explore?
I landed all over Patagonia and went to
Yeah,
and then we went on down to Ushuaia. You know where that is? The southernmost airport in the world. It's on the island south of Magellan Strait.
yeah. Wow.
And we landed there, and there's glaciers and it's a spectacular place. So we landed there, southernmost airport in the world, 14,000 miles south of the route I took, from my home airport. And
So just out of curiosity, I come from this other, I like the safety and comfort of my own bed. What happens if you have mechanical trouble with your plane? I mean, do they have services that they can get in there, or are you going to be there for a while, or how does
that's
that
a
work?
very good question, Randy. And the answer is that you're taking a tremendous risk.
Yeah,
It's these airplanes we have, these were fairly not that many are made. And down there, I mean, people would come up to me in these airports just staring at the plane. And they never seen we landed in places the people came out and they said we were the first Americans to ever land there, ever. And they just wanted to look at what Americans look like, and here we are with these fancy planes. They just could not relate to that. So you have a problem there. You have a real problem, and actually this is one of the reasons why, you can fly these planes to Europe, and a lot of people do. And you go up to Newfoundland and you go to Ghana and you crawl over to Greenland, and Greenland to Reykjavik, and Reykjavik to Edinburgh.
right,
I refuse to do that for the reason that you're just pointing out, that if you have a problem and you have to land and you're out in and that area you're out of the shipping lanes, there's no rescue assets.
right.
You can go down in ice water, and everybody has a raft, but you might be in it for days, and and it would take forever to. So I just got on a plane and flew over. It took 10 hours from L.A. to Copenhagen or Germany.
Right.
So, but on this was the Patagonia is something I recommend every American see. If you haven't been there, it will knock your socks off. It is beautiful beyond belief. You have these 10,000-foot mountains that jump right straight up 10,000, glaciers all over them, lakes. It is breathtaking. And I strongly recommend, if you haven't been there, you go and see Patagonia. But that same thing you pointed out, okay, is also present in this whole thing. I flew over hours and hours and hours over the Amazon. And large portions of it don't even have maps of it. And they just have this uncharted, and wait a
Right.
minute. It's the 21st century. It can't be uncharted. It is. And it's triple canopy desert. And if you go down, they don't have, first, there's no rescue asset. There's nothing here, and you're down, they'll never find you, I mean, so
Oh,
it was a very, very, and we got into thunderstorms over the Amazon,
oh my goodness.
couldn't get out of them. And that was one of the most hairy moments of it, is a plane that's flipping almost upside down and getting knocked around by these thunderstorms and big flashes of lightning. And knowing that, and Marianne kept teasing me, said that's where the most deadly frog in the world, this little tiny,
Right.
and he's got his bib on and his fork in his hands waiting for him.
Well,
And
I congratulate you on finding somebody. It would be fascinating to go back to that old meet and greet place that you found your beautiful wife, because I mean that somebody has to have the same bent on flying. We have opportunities to fly, but I like planes with four big engines, or now two big engines, that can I've been on I think it was a 16-hour flight from Washington to Dubai and back. I mean, that's a nice little flight, and of course going back and forth to Hawaii. And I'm always looking down at that water, and so I'm bored. I'm born gutless. I mean, I'm not like you. It's just, it's been interesting, some of the flights I've been on, that commercial flights, that were interesting.
American aviation, you are safer
Yeah.
in the fuselage of an American commercial airliner than you are in your own bed and
Yeah.
home.
Oh no, now I can't, now I can't sleep. I can't sleep tonight. Don't give me that.
They
I
have
know it's
casualties, you have a heart attack that you
yeah, no, stop.
no
Stop,
crime.
stop the sadness. Stop, we're killing me here. So no, I've fallen out of bed, and that's true. Anyway, so okay, fun facts. Been out in the wilderness, climbed all over these mountains. True, not true. You've had dinner with a Sasquatch.
So, well, I
Bigfoot?
invited
Have you
him, but
seen Bigfoot?
he didn't show. I'm sorry.
No?
No.
No, no good, huh? You've never, in all the camping, never seen Bigfoot. Dang.
Looked everywhere, but
No, no hair. Okay, second part two. Ever had aliens drop in on you and ask for can of beans or anything? Yeah, ever seen?
they have I look up and I see these lights and I didn't know what they were, but they haven't actually come to me yet, to take us to your leader,
This really sad, because of all the hours you've spent there. I thought you'd give me some good stories. So boxers or briefs when you're camping, is it we got to get into the details. When you go camping, the question I'm trying to ask, you have to be prepared when you're going up in the mountains and all that. So safety, I know that you probably take along what, radio phones, or
take along an inReach. If you give me 30 seconds, I'll go get it. I mean, show it to you.
Sure. I'll sit here and
30 seconds, 20
yeah,
seconds.
I'll sit here and belittle you. No problem. This has always been fun for Robert and I. I'm always picking on him, and I told him that this segment today was going to be all about Robert. So he has led a full and illustrious life, traveling all over the world. So for us on Global Eco Traveling and Live Eco Style, because of our Global Eco Traveling Eco and Media certification, we now have invitations to take our media group trip partners into about 3 or 4 different countries. And now the problem with that is that that is going invisible because of so hold it up to your jacket, in front of your jacket, and let's see. There you go. So the background in your jacket, hold up a little bit higher. Yeah, so there, now we get it. So it's not that big, but that tunes into a satellite then?
This is a Garmin inReach, capital IN, capital REACH. You can see
Okay.
this thing has incredible capacities. You can buy them in any REI, any camping store. About $400 before the discounts. And it has 4 features. Number one, it can have a tracking mode. And so it will send up to the Iridium satellites. It has to be able to see the sky, but if you can see the sky, it works any place on the surface of the earth.
Wow.
The middle of the ocean, but it doesn't matter. If you see the sky, it works. So it sends up and you can figure out how often you want this. It will send up a beep every minute, every 5 minutes, every 30 minutes. It sends up a signal, and it goes to a website that your wife, girlfriend, parents can look at, and they can track you real time as you climb the mountain. They can see where you are. So if you pass out or faint or get, they know it will keep sending these signals, and it will identify where you are. So it has weather. You can punch the thing and say, I want weather, charge you $1.50. It will send you an algorithmically done weather to your exact location and elevation. What it's going to rain, a whole weather for it. You can get a 2-day or a 1-day. Okay. It also has a text feature, so I can hang it up in my tent, and then Bluetooth to my iPhone, and then lay in my sleeping bag and text lovey-dovey back and forth to my wife, you know. And then lastly, and this is the most important thing, it has on the back of it this button right here, this big SOS button. And if you push that button, it sends up the signal to the Iridium satellites. It bounces it down to the Houston Center for this Garmin's International Emergency Rescue Coordination Center in Houston. And they have access to people who speak 200 languages. And
Wow.
they manage this thing for the world. And it will figure out. First of all, it tells them exactly where you are. And that's a big feature in search and rescue. People don't realize it. Up until recently, it was mostly search and very little rescue because they can find you out there. It's just you're just finding somebody on a mountain if you know on the mountain it's going to be. But this tells you exactly the rescuers within this much of where you are. So they
Right.
can
Wow.
go to you. So it
So
sends
now,
it.
wait, so we're gonna have to send the bill to Garmin for this infomercial that just ran. You know, selling more of these Garmin, right?
It's Garmin. You know, I don't, you know, this is, you know, it goes to the search and rescue with jurisdiction over you. This is it's a huge,
That's amazing.
blind issue. And so, you know, most in the US, there's a county search and rescue group volunteers, and they get it, they call them, they go out and they find it, and then they tell them where you are, and they store data about me, so they know who I am, what color my gear is, what are my medical stuff, my blood type. They know all this, and they know where I am, and they come and get, and so I have seen it used several times. I've told you on these events where I was out in the wilderness and somebody falls, and I other guides will push the button. And they send a helicopter in 30 minutes to pick them up.
Well,
So it is,
I tell you, it's amazing that technology and all these miles and hills that you've climbed and made it back every time. It's incredible. And a couple other questions, because we've got about 12 minutes left in the Robert Mills hour of power here. I know we'll go into an extended version, but you know, we're going to try to shoot for that. We're going to fit this. So the couple questions I have, you've been all over the world, Africa, Europe, South America, of course, North America, Alaska. Tell me the top three places, if you could go back to right now, top three places that you'd go, you know, you get there safely and come home, that you've enjoyed and you'd go back to visit.
that's a hard one. Is it looking for the map of
Well, we've talked about Africa, we've talked about Morocco, which the show.
Morocco is a fabulous place. There's a country in Africa that it's not coming up that I think, you know, I loved Myanmar. I
Mhm.
thought was an absolutely fascinating place, untouched. It's really just wild. And Bolivia you know, is an incredible place. Um, and on the more civilized front, you know, I loved Buenos Aires. I loved Japan, and where else?
Tell me about
Portugal,
Portugal.
Portugal.
Yeah,
Oh, and Ireland and Scotland are much more beautiful and wilder and more interesting than I expected them to be.
yeah, and you don't even play golf, really. I mean, that wouldn't be
That's true.
it wouldn't be a golf buddy trip. But again, we have our the art of travel. We have Art Strickland on our where we play golf eco style that takes trips to Ireland and Scotland every year. Iconic golf courses. So when you on the Happy Hour Lifestyle Show, we can't leave him out. We're not going to segment the show today where we bring in Art after we get done talking with Robert we're stepping on Art's time, put it that way, because Art's just going to have to suffer. Yeah, he's been with us. He's a Pulitzer nominated author. He's published about 19 books, and he's the president of the Texas Golf Writers Association. And Art is well loved. And to give him a little commercial about Ireland and Scotland, yes, he does have trips this coming summer going to Ireland. So if you go to the Art of Golf Travel, this show is not sponsored by Art. I just have to do that if I want to keep
Ah,
keep him as one of our best friends. anyway, we of course have kicked off our global eco traveling certification. That what we do is that we took the last 10 to 12 years and tried to figure out how we're going to go out, and it was a question when it came to travel. I asked a online provider of those kind of trips and cars and places to stay. I said, how come you don't have a button to push when people sign up for trips to make it green travel? So getting into that area of your world, I know that you have done and you care about the world, global warming. I mean, you see it. You've been around the world and you've served on different committees and you're passionate about it. Tell us about your work and understanding what's going on with this global warming issue and how it affects the world as you see it.
Well, I just wanted to mention that Namibia was the country that I is the
Got
name
it. Okay. All right.
and it is it's a democracy. It only has like 2 million people and it's huge. It's wild as can be. It has the biggest sand dunes in the world. It's very friendly, and it's just a remarkable place. Okay. And so what was the question you asked me
Well,
was,
the question is, I have another comment. I remember doing one of the shows. I believe it was you. Didn't your daughter come face to face with either a lion, tiger, or something in one of
oh
your?
yes, yes, that was an Africa trip.
Uh,
The lion comes up and we're in one of those open jeeps, and the
right.
lion like sticks his face right in her face, and they turn and they look at each other, and the guy says,
Yeah.
just don't move, don't say a word. And he just drives off, and it
So
was
when it comes to your wife and flying and your daughter going on a passionate tour like that, you should write a book, The Horrors of Traveling with Robert Mills. It's just it's
so you asked me a question and I jumped off on the big. What was
okay. The question is, global eco travel. I mean, we talk about it up front. We have live eco style. What does all that mean? Well, I didn't want to ever always get into these
yes,
heated debates. Okay, so you've been around the world, and I know that you're a passionate, lover of trying to help people understand what's going on in this world. What? Just give us a 2 minute your understanding of global warming or what that means, or what you've experienced, the different boards that you've served on and different areas that you've tried to penetrate that culture to help people understand.
it's a very apt question today. I'm on the board now. I'm the treasurer of the Solar Rights Alliance, and this is the sort of the sphere of like about 300 different ecological green groups from the Sierra Club. And we do lobbying in Sacramento for green energy, solar power, and things like that. And it's been fascinating to try to work with that and to see. In California, we have now 2.5 million houses that we have solar panels on. And I have solar panels on my house, and I have 2 electric cars. And the sun comes right in there, goes into the batteries, and drives my cars. Haven't bought a drop of gas in 15 years.
Wow.
So I think that on the solar on the climate change, people come on my tours. I give history tours for the city of San Francisco, the San Francisco's city guides. If you're ever in San Francisco, there's free tours. You need to go on that, sfcityguides.org. And but people don't understand that they're very simple. A lot of people come in and they say, well, climate change is it's a hoax. And I say, well, in the 1850s, there was this incredible Irish physicist named John Tyndall, and that mountain behind me is Mount Tyndall, named for him, 14,000 peak. And he discovered the greenhouse effect of carbon dioxide. He's very famous in Europe and famous in scientific circles. And in 1859, 176 years ago, he put 2 and 2 together, and he figured, he went to volcanoes and he realized that volcanoes put carbon dioxide into the Earth's atmosphere, warming it, glaciers retreat, and plants and trees take it out and sequester it under the ground in coal, oil, and gas. And as they do that, it gets colder and the glaciers advance. And people have known for centuries that glaciers came and went. And now 1859, this paper was the foundation of climate science. Now, at that moment, humans were there were no cars for 2 generations or 3 generations after that. There were no internal combustion engines. There was a little bit of coal being burned, but humans were relatively tiny, contributor to carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Today, 36 billion tons of carbon every year pumped into our paper thin atmosphere. The atmosphere is only 3.5 miles thick at sea level pressure. If you had a pipe that long, you tipped it up, that would be the Earth's atmosphere in terms of the molecules. You can see that's why forest fire in British Columbia can darken the skies over Manhattan in 3 days. It's a very paper thin atmosphere, and we're pumping these billions of tons of carbon. And this was known for is uncontroversial. And so people come to, well, Robert, I had this high school teacher I was a guide in Alaska, and he's sitting down and he said, Robert, this is a natural process. Why would you, what's this climate hoax thing? And I said, yes, it is a natural process. And I talk about John Tyndall, and you never heard of him. And I explained, I said, go research this guy, and Google, you have the Library of Congress in your pocket. Say, Siri, give me the pros and cons of climate change. Up it will come. But if you put 36 billion tons of carbon, why wouldn't that replicate the volcanoes and cause the climate? Why wouldn't that do that? This is the third grade concept. It's arithmetic. What is the problem?
Robert, here's what we're going to do. You're passionate about it. I knew I was going to touch the thorny side of where both of us live. This is going to lead us into, if you'd be willing to come back and share another opportunity on the Happy Hour Lifestyle Show. We'll dedicate a whole nother show to our traveling, but I want to get into the nuts and bolts of what you've seen around the world. We'll talk about and open up and talk about today potentially what the administration is doing and dissolving our belonging to the Paris climate accords, number one. Number two, as of yesterday, there's no more funding for electric vehicle funding and build outs around the country, except of course Tesla has the biggest network. Strange that would be the case. And how this all adds up, because being in my world, when we're going to be pumping and drilling and going and getting more organics out of the the dead dinosaur pool, I call it, and pumping that into the air. I think maybe it'd be good for us to touch base. It's one thing, we know that the politics of it is hot. We know that there's not going to be any resolution of us changing anybody's mind other than trying to help them educate. But I've traveled a little bit around the world. I've been to Hawaii. If you go and you just talk about the devastating storms that just hit Maui and washed away roads and beaches. I just had lunch with my son today as a child, played on a beach that no longer is there, no longer exists. The road down in Kihei has been wiped out, and that big beach at Beach 2, it's called, on Maui, just gone. I mean, just mud storm, sailed out of the mountains, and I'd never seen anything like that in Maui at all. So I'd like to talk about the actual things you're seeing in the world. I know, and you're walking and understanding what's going on. If you'd be willing to come back, we'll open up the Happy Hour Lifestyle Show again.
I was just up in Washington a year or so ago, and I had climbed in the Cascades like 25 years earlier, and they were in this campsite. You could hear the glaciers then. They're gone. I mean, it is staggering what the difference that it has made. And I can tell you one thing about what the administration has done in this last week or so is that the champagne corks in Beijing are coming out.
Yeah.
I mean, they are doing handstands. Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House, and Reagan took them down, and the Chinese leaped in and got 80% of that lucrative global market. And now they're going to get the rest of it because we're stepping aside here and pretending. And when I confront the people about global warming and about, I say, what is it about that you don't understand? Where is the opinion in this? I mean, this is arithmetic. Volcanoes, we take the carbon and up on the ground, sequester it. We pull it out, burn it, put it back in the atmosphere. It warms the atmosphere. It's been going on for over 1 billion years. What is it about that you don't understand? I mean, what is it about this even cause you to doubt it? You know, there's been that climate science thing in Cambridge since 1860s.
All right.
Everybody on Earth agrees to this, and so we're going to give this market and the future. It's too late for Trump to stop this. I mean, the green thing is going now in cars, you know, electric.
Well, Robert, let's save it. I knew I'm touching I'm like, you're like at the dentist office with no Novocaine with me poking around. I've got all 4 back molars now. I've got opened up with no fillings in it. And I just poked and prodded in there. But that's what's great about your passion, your travels, and Robert Mills, and for the Live Eco Style community that we have, that features all the good things in life. We try to keep it lively and upbeat, but I always like the passion coming out with Robert. That's why he's a key part of our team, and we hope to travel all over the world. But the message we're going to give today is just really how it affects people really when they're making their decision. Because today, the reason we came up with our Global Eco Traveling certification is that 90%, it's between 85 to 90%, could be higher than 90% of today's travel consumers look before they leap, before they put their money, to make sure that it's sustainable. And I've got thousands of pages of research on this, and I research it every Monday to see what new articles are out. But today's travel consumer is very eco-minded. You can't get away from it. And from all over the world, I get media releases, just people writing about it, the travel consumer writing about it. So what does that mean? Well, we need Robert's side that, as you can see, he's incredibly intelligent, well versed in this, and he actually has exposed himself to climbing the highest mountains. And that particular expertise, and then having been all over the world, and just me, old Uncle Randy, all we're trying to do is make sure that when the travel consumer goes and travels, dines, sips, recreates, plays golf, wears any fashions, and goes to spas, that it's all eco-minded. These places do have sustainability scenarios. Being down at the PGA Merchandise Show, I found out, it was very, very interesting, that there were over 1,000 vendors down there, and I looked at every website of the new vendors coming to the show. 40% of them had sustainable practices that they, had out there. The only problem was that they were hiding them on their website. They pay thousands of pages or thousands of dollars for people to put their they made the choice to have sustainable practices. But what does it mean? And then you couldn't even find it on their website unless you went down into the 2 font where it said sustainability next to where it says contact. And then when you hit sustainability, it opened up like 4 to 8 pages of beautiful website talking about sustainable features. Well, why do you hide it? And all we were trying to say, and all we're trying to say with I'm trying to be the supportive side to Robert. He's had the experience. All I'm trying to do is help the consumer find these destinations and maybe possibly understand that, sustainability is really a part of a majority of people looking for it. Consumer and all levels.
Wonderful thing, Brent. It's a wonderful thing that you're doing. I think the consumer needs it. You're all for the right cause. And I think that people really appreciate having that because you're making it easy for people to do the good thing.
Yeah, and it gives them the opportunity to report to us if they get certified with us. Somebody travels there and they find out that it's what they call greenwashing. It's not really true. They come and report back to us, and we call them up and say, hey, we're going to pull that certificate, or we're going to support, to get back to the consumer and let them know how you're making it better. And that's all we're really trying to do, is that when people certify with us, we're the only certification company that, if you look at our liveecostyle.com, we're not only on Roku on Live Eco Style, one channel, and Excited Minds Media on another, but we just, as of this week, pulled all of our media within our website. It's easy to find. You go to liveecostyle.com, go to the top and hit the media button, and it'll click into the same thing that's on Roku, and it's live 24 hours a day. And all those places that certify with us, the great interviews I've had with CEOs around the world, literally talking about their green practices. They're very interesting. That's on our site. But there's going to be, I just wanted to lay the groundwork and just let you know that Robert Mills is such an important part of our Live Eco Style team, because he's had feet on the ground. He's had the wings in the air. He's taken his children to be fed to the tigers and lions, I guess. I'm not sure. But he's got a great family, highly, highly regarded in where he lives, and certainly so many things we're going to get into. So Robert, I really appreciate you. We'll gather again soon to cover a little bit more in depth your passion about this global warming issue, but moreover, talking about places you've seen where maybe it's not so much, or it's been worse than, or it's just not a part of it. But we want to make it concrete for our travelers that coming to Live Eco Style and Global Eco Traveling, part of our company, that you can tell them with your own eyes and your ears and your families and your wife what that they experienced going all over the world. Nobody better to do it than Robert Mills. So thank you so much for joining us today, Robert.
Thank you, Randy. It's been a pleasure. Looking forward to the next one.
Well, I do too. I can't wait. And this is old Uncle Randy for Live Eco Style LLC and the Distillery Channel Media LLC and Global Eco Traveling LLC, and our media companies all tied together in our production team going forward on the Happy Hour Lifestyle Show, coming to you from the heart of America. So everybody be safe out there, and always remember, leave a better footprint, because that's the way my grandfather taught me. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.